Hey class, so today we are going to be talking about the book Across Five Aprils. Okay, so we have been discussing about the Civil War and about some things that happened, right? We've kind of touched base on that. We made some predictions on what we thought the Civil War was about. We came to the conclusion the Civil War was in the United States, of course, right? The title of this book is Across Five Aprils, right? And this is about a young soldier and his family in the Civil War. Irene Hunt is our author. Mr. Pucci is his name is Albert John Pucci. He is our illustrator, okay, which is not named in the book, but that is who our illustrator is. So looking at the front of the book here, guys, let's make some predictions here. We know what's about the Civil War, right? But like specifically, what kind of stands out, right? Right, we have the American flag, right, posted up, right? So we know that that's in America. The biggest thing that you guys pointed out, which is great, was the fact that there is a instrument here that they use for farming, right? So what can we take away from the fact that we see this? Right, exactly. So that he is a farmer, right? So maybe he is a farmer, okay, and that maybe he's in the war, maybe he's not. So what's your prediction? Do you think he's a part of this war? Do you think he's in the Civil War, or do you think he's just a farmer who maybe has family in the Civil War? What's your predictions, right? So go ahead and make your predictions on what you think this is going to be about, who this is about, right? And we're going to start reading about this across 5 Aprils. We're going to start on chapter 4, okay? Chapter 4. Twice during the month, on February in 1862, the bells rang in every city and town throughout the North, and the name Ulysses S. Grant first became familiar to Jethro. Okay, so we know that Jethro is the main character here, guys, right? And who is Ulysses S. Grant? Right, that's right, he was head of the military, right? He was one of the head of the militaries to help with the cause in the Civil War, right? The first real victory for the North had come with the fall of the Fort Henry down in Tennessee, just a few miles south of the Kentucky line. Give me 1 second here, guys. God bless Grant, people shouted over and over in the rising chant the day Jethro went to Newton with his father after the news of Fort Henry. Guns were fired, people hugged one another in the streets. Here was something to make them proud, something to give them hope. After the despairing stories of Bull Run and Ball's Bluff and Wilson Creek. 2 weeks later came the news that Fort Donelson had also fallen to General Grant. Then people really went wild with joy. God bless old U.S. Grant, they shrieked. Bless old unconditional surrender Grant. They laughed and cried, and nearly everybody thought that the war would be over in a matter of weeks. All right, so based on this right here, what we just read, how do you think they feel about Grant? Is it a good thing, or is it do they feel like he's a good guy, or do they think he's kind of a bad guy? Right, they shrieked, right? But all unconditional surrender Grant, they laughed and cried and thought that the war would be over in a matter of weeks. So it seems like they're happy, right? They said, God bless them. They're happy that the war, that he's doing these things to end this war. So it seems like they're on his side, right? Well, what do you think, Pa? Jenny asked eagerly a few days later, as she put down the paper she had been reading aloud to the family. Do you think it's about over? Matt's face was grim. With the Army of the Potomac doing nothing, he asked. Maybe my wits ain't good. Maybe I ain't got the sense to grasp what it is they're doing. But I can't see the end in sight. That general the papers had us believe was so fine, brilliant, they called him. What does he plan? What's the matter with him? General McClellan has had typhoid fever, Paul. You know how weak that left Shade. we mustn't judge him too harsh. So how does Paul in this story, how does he feel about General McClellan? Right, right. He doesn't think that he's good. He thinks he's kind of dim-witted, right? He's not, he thinks he's not doing a very good job, right? They talk this guy up at being brilliant and smart, but really how he feels about him is he's not so good, right? Good. Now let's talk about this for a minute. He mentions that they had a child, Shade, who had typhoid fever. Do we know what typhoid fever is? Somebody know? So what it is, it's a serious bacterial infection. Okay, it's usually given through contaminated food and water, right? So it makes you really sick. You get high fevers, you hallucinate. Typhoid fever is really something bad, and so here they say that General McClellan, has had typhoid fever. So he should understand. Paul should understand. Why should he understand how typhoid fever is? Because why? Right, because Shade had typhoid fever, one of their relatives, right? So they know what that is. Typhoid fever is something to be scared about, right? Matt nodded. Maybe I misjudged the man, Jenny. God knows I hope that one of these days you can say that your pa was wrong about General McClellan. He reached for the week-old paper and read again the letter that was great tonic and stimulant of the day. Headquarters Army in the field camp near Fort Dosslin, February 16th. This is what the red letter said, guys. General S.B. Buckner, Confed Army. So who is Mr. Buckner with? The Confederacy. Good. He's with the Confederacy Army, right? States it right there. Nice job. It's just hyphenated, but it is Confederacy. Good. Sir, yours on this date proposing armistice and appointment of commissioners to settle terms of capitulation is just received. No terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. I propose to move immediately upon your works. I am, sir, very respectful, your Sergeant, U.S. Grant, Brig General. Good. Matt read on farther down the page. It says here that the General Buckner and Grant was comrades at West Point. He remarked without lifting his eye from the paper. Yes, Jethro heard his mother say softly to herself. And my Bill and Tom was even closer than that. They were worried about Tom and Eb. It was likely that the two boys were with Grant's army. The fighting, especially at Donelson, had been bitter. Some of the details of the battle neither Matt nor Jenny had read aloud to Ellen. Finally, one day, Ed Turner brought them a letter from Tom. Ed looked pinched with cold after his long drive, but he wouldn't stop for coffee. A family needs to be alone when one of these letters comes, he said, in answer to Ellen's invitation. I'd be pleased if you'd let me know what the boy has to say. Later on, when Matt has the time to drop over. Jenny had gone with her father to see about some stock, and Jethro was alone in the cabin with his mother. When Ed Turner was gone, she handed the letter to Jethro. My hands is shaking, son, she said. They were indeed, but both she and the boy knew that the real reason she was forced to hand the letter over was the fact that she could not read. All right. So, based on that, what can we say about their education? Right, it's not very good, right? She can't read, so she's having him read for her, right? Good. The envelope was crumpled and stained, the letter written in pencil in a round childish hand. It was probably among the first 3 or 4 letters that young Tom had even written. Okay? So this is what the letter said. Dear folks, I want you to pay close attention, guys, to the spelling here. I take pencil in hand to let you know that Eb and me is all right. I expect, but you know by now how we took Fort Henry down here. Maybe I oughta say we took it because it was the ironclads that done it. All right, so let's pause here for a second. Talk about some things. What do we notice about the spelling right now? Right, it's very misspelled words, right? He spelled the word like Know, as N-O, pencil, P-E-N-C-L-E, right? He also spelled maybe wrong, M-E-B-B-Y, right? So seems like he can read and write, but very subtly. It's very hard for him to read and write, or he struggles with the writing aspect of it, right? So maybe his education it was a little higher obviously than mom's, but maybe it wasn't the best either, right? Maybe he's working on the farm so much that maybe they just didn't have time, right, guys? Good. So what are ironclads? Y'all know what ironclads are? Somebody know what ironclads are? So they are huge military vehicles that are armored up. That it's hard to penetrate them, and they use those to go into town and take over towns. It protects the soldiers, right? So that's what ironclads are. All right. Old Admiral Foote had what it took, and he give the Rebs a dressing down, but some of his ironclads got hit hard. A boy I know was on the Essex, and he was burned so bad he did it when that boat got knocked out of the fight. Us boys didn't do much fighting at Fort Henry, but at Donelson I could tell you we made up for it. We had done a foolish thing on our way to Donelson, and I will write you about it. When we was marching toward the fort, the weather was like a hot April day back home. We was feeling set up about Fort Henry, and when some of the boys got tired of carrying heavy blanket rolls, they just up and throwed them away. Then more and more of us acted like crazy fools. And we throwed away heavy coats and things to make our loads a little lighter. As soon as we got to Donelson, the weather turned cold as Billy sideways, and some of the boys that was sick or bad hurt, they froze to death in the snow. Things was awful bad, with so many killed and others froze. I felt sick when I looked at them, and so I am not so proud about Donelson as maybe I ought to be. I miss your good cooking, Ma. You would just that bane of solar ain't so much. Yours truly, Tom. Okay. Jethro noticed that his mother's face was strangely twisted when he looked up from the letter. There was a look about her as if sorrow had been frozen in her face, a look he had not seen there before. Not even on the day when he had come home from Walnut Hill to tell her that Bill had left. She stared at Jethro for a time without saying a word. Then she got up and went into the pantry, closing the door behind her. Jethro sat quietly beside the fireplace. There was no sound in the cabin except the crackling of the fire, and there was no feeling inside him except the great loneliness. He picked up Tom's letter and read it again. Then he smoothed it carefully and returned it to the envelope. It seemed strange that the scrap of paper had actually come from a battlefield that Tom's big hand had actually touched. He tried to imagine that the ironclads looked like and how they had taken Fort Henry. How the guns must have roared in Donelson. Whatever in the world had possessed Tom and the other soldiers when they threw away good winter coats and blankets. The pantry door opened after a while, and his mother came back into the kitchen. Your ma's now company for her this afternoon, son. That's no matter, that's no matter, Ma. Maybe it would be good for you to go down and visit Shade for a while. She suggested after a pause, you need a mite of change. He turned to her eagerly. Could I, Ma? He asked, half in disbelief that he had understood her. I want him to read Tom's letter, she said, taking up the envelope. Maybe after Pa and Jenny has seen it, you could take it on to Shade. Sure, Ma. I'd be proud to do it for you. Alan smiled wanly at his eagerness. It's terribly cold, but I reckon you could stay the night with them if he's a mind to ask you. Then you'd have only one way to walk. You're doing me a real big favor, Miss Cretan. I allowed it would be, Jeff. Well, you and Shad have a good visit tonight. Ask him to come here for supper tomorrow. Him and little Jenny's ain't got many more evenings to be together. The prospect of a visit with Shadrach changed the color of the world around Jeff, and he rushed to get his chores done early. He stacked a high pile of wood outside the kitchen where it could be reached quickly during the night. Out in the barn, he threw hay down from a loft and carried buckets of corn from the crib, in preparation for the evening feeding of the stock. He was still working when Jenny came out and to find him shortly after she and her father returned from their work. He noticed that her eyes were heavy with tears. You read Tom's letter? He asked. She sat down on a mound of hay, and the tears started again. Jethro stood beside her, without speaking. After a while, she looked up at him. Ma says you're going to go up to Shad's tonight. Ma's having him here for supper tomorrow night, so you and him can talk some, he said, recognizing the envy in her look. Ma understands. She let me marry Shad before he leaves, but Pa won't. He talked to me about it, and in the afternoon it was the same old story. You're too young to be married, Jenny. You're just a little girl. Oh, Jeff, it's horrible to be so young. Why does there have to be a war to take Shad away from me before I am of age? That Pa thinks he is old enough for me marrying? Jethro was sympathetic and terribly uncomfortable. He shifted from one foot to the other and touched her shoulder timidly. She put her hand over his in an instant and then got to her feet. I reckon I got precious little right to be crying over my troubles. So we're going to stop there, guys. So we made a prediction earlier that we thought him being in the war, Shad being in the war, that he may or may not come back. Right? What are your thoughts on that right now? Right, good. So, some of you guys think that he may come back from this war, right? I mean, this is a terrible war. Yeah, obviously, there's a lot going on. She loves him, right? So, right now, just to see, as of right now, since we're in chapter 4, has some of your predictions? I mean, you guys may have predicted he may have died early in the chapter. I mean, he's sent off earlier. So, some of you guys may have, we had talked about, do we think that he would make it through the war? When do we think, if you do think he wouldn't? When do you think that may have happened, right? When do you think he may have perished? Early in the war, later in the war, right? So, has your predictions stayed the same? Have they changed? I want you guys to get in your groups, and what we're going to do, I have a story map, right? You guys fill the story map out. I want you guys to get in your groups of 3. Talk about the generals that we discussed, right? There's some generals in the book that we have discussed from the book and in our topics in history about the generals and who they were, the different sides, right? We have 2 different sides going at war here. And what are they fighting for, right? One side's fighting for something particular, the other one is as well. So you've got to determine that as well. And then I want you guys to tell me who is the president at this time, okay? All right. All right, guys, you can get to work.